Healthy soils lead to healthy produce, lead to healthy gut system, and lead to healthy people. The 60 pages of references on the book of Anne Bickley and David R. Montgomery clearly show this connection. If you want to know more, we interviewed them before and I will put a link below. So how can we use this fact to build scalable companies and reach the people that are currently not being reached? Our guest today decided to focus on women's hormonal health and specifically polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, which is the most common endocrine, which is hormonal disorder for women of reproductive age. About 20% of women suffer from this. Why? Because all the toxicity in our current food system messes with our hormones, and this can be managed by lifestyle changes and, more importantly, diets. What are the connections between healthy farming practices, healthy soil, healthy produce, healthy gut, and healthy people? Welcome to a special series where we go deep into the relationship between regenerative agriculture practices that build soil health and the nutritional quality of the food we end up eating. We unpack the current state of science, the role of investments, businesses, nonprofits, entrepreneurs, and more. This series is supported by the A-Team Foundation, who support food and land projects that are ecologically, economically, and socially conscious. They contribute to a wider movement that envisions a future where real food is produced by enlightened agriculture and access to it is equal. The A-Team Foundation are looking to make more investments and grants in the space of bionutrients. You can find more here, ateamfoundation.org, or get in touch directly, info@ateamfoundation.org, or check the information in the show notes below. Welcome to another episode, today with the founder of Harvest Care, Zuzanna, which we go deep into nutrient density, potentially my favorite subject of this podcast. So I'm very, very happy to have Zuzanna here. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for being here.
So we met, I will put the link below, obviously, with the interview we did with Bart through Fresh Ventures. But I would love to, which is a venture studio based in Rotterdam, focused on regenerative agriculture and food. But I would love to know a bit more about how, like your story, how did you end up focusing on soil and then focusing on the health side of humans and that connection to healthy soil? Like what's the meandering river into that, or what's the story into that?
Yeah, so I was very, very lucky because I have studied global health and nutrition in Denmark. And in our first semester, we had half a year dedicated for agriculture. And I remember sitting in that class and being taught about... I
don't think that's normal. Just for anybody that I don't think many of these studies take, okay, let's start at the basics, let's start at soil. I think that's, you were lucky. Or did you pick that one specifically for that, or you just got lucky?
No, it was just the design of the program. And, you know, I remember sitting in the class and being taught about no-till agriculture. And back then, like, it didn't make any sense. I was like, what the heck is happening, you know? And then we even would go to like 30 kilometers from where my university was. We had one of the only, I think, organic farming school in whole Europe. So we'd also have a tour out there. And as you said, like I'm super lucky. I think like I would assume that it's one of the only universities in Europe that actually taught about, the food production in quite a depth. And I think from then on, something clicked, like something really clicked very deep in me. I think I never really resonate with the approach to dieting as, you know, something that you use to restrict your calories and something that you do to have your summer body. And I think there is so much toxicity coming from all sorts of the industries that benefit on people. On making people feel uncomfortable in what they eat and how they look. And I think that was it. That was for me like a completely different look and a completely different approach to our food and what food means to us and to ecosystem. And I think from then on, it was just like a continuous path towards soil and agriculture.
But you didn't become a farmer. Like you decided to, or did you try that? Like what was the obvious next step after that study for you?
Yeah. So, that was on the first semester. So I still had like many semesters to come because I actually just graduated my bachelor half a year ago. So everything is quite fresh. yeah, we had the chance to go on an internship, and back then I was working in a coffee shop, so it was kind of natural flow for me to work with a certain ingredient and to really wanting to discover of what is the whole life cycle of this certain ingredients. I was planning to go on a coffee farm to Guatemala to discover the difference between agriculture, organic and conventional coffee production. And then Corona happened, so that of course grounded me in Denmark. So I was gifted with the time to just have to freeze my time and do something with it. So I started to volunteer in an urban community farm, which also work as a care farm. So they managed to get finances for people with mental challenges to employ them as gardeners, as food producers, to heal through reconnecting to nature. And this is where the first step of learning something in class and then going to visiting farming school and then starting ideating about it and then putting my hands into action. And I think that was definitely one of the most impactful months of my life, where I wasn't just being taught about something theoretically, but actually I put my hands dirty. And this is also where especially the love to soil started, because I was like really ideating how can I help them the most in this small half an hectare farm, and it really came to digging deeper into composting and seeing how I can utilize the organic materials from the city that are abundant, as for example coffee waste, which I could bring from after my shift. I would put it on my backpack and I would bike with the coffee waste to a compost that we have built, and really trying to enrich the soil quality there, and this is how it started.
I think many people underestimate the power of gardening or farming with those intentions or those practices. I don't think anybody would argue, let's have let's say a care farm on a large extractive GMO fed soil. Like nobody would go there to get healed. Like that's not an approach, but somehow it really naturally fits, which is, I just realized it now, which it really is an interesting way. Like you would go to farms like this to get healed, not only because you're doing physical work and there's the structure and all of that, but also because there is something with working with your hands in the soil, of course, healthy soil, that apparently seems to be healing. Did you, like, what was the biggest, I mean, you said it clicked with you. Was there a specific moment, or was there something you saw like, okay, there's more than just, okay, this is nice because we're working outside. You could also do woodworking, but this is different. There's something different about working with soil and working with food. What, do you remember when it clicked for you?
I actually visited this urban farm already a few times before, and just each time, like just stepping, there'll be a pavement, and stepping out of the concrete into the soil, like already would have such a transformational effect on my body and my spirit. But I think that the society that we live in and the prevalent consumerism and capitalism really make us feel so inadequate and so like feeling of lack all the time. And being there with people with schizophrenia and depression and all kind of people that I would never met, and then being so grateful and honored that I can be around to people that live completely different stories than I, and still would develop a deep bond over planting sunflowers, and I would be just also be able to see how other people interact with nature, of some singing to the plants that they were harvesting, because they believe in little fairies that are taking care of the well-being of the plants, which now when I think about soil microbiome and the soil food web, like
they are the fairy. They are the fairies, of course.
It's there, of course.
They see things we don't see. Doesn't mean they're not there. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe we can see them as well if we take microscope, but they just feel they are there, So I think for the first time in my life, I felt that I so deeply belong without having to prove anything. So rather than, it was not that I was helping the garden and the people, the garden was healing me. And I felt firsthand experience of what it means to feel welcome. And yeah.
Very interesting. There's, I think, a documentary out there, To Where We Belong, something like that, on farming as well. I'll put a link below. It's streamable, I think, for $10 or something. You can get it. Anyway, it's a very interesting sentence you mentioned. But then you could have stayed there. You could have worked in your shifts in the coffee place. You could have biked with the coffee leftover. I'm not going to call it waste because it's not. With the coffee opportunity to this farm, and you interned there and you volunteered there, and that would be a very fulfilling path. But you chose to take a different route.
Yeah. So I think the coffee like really awakened me, and I know that like obviously coffee awakes us every morning, but for me it was much more on like a spiritual level that the coffee awakened me to start really.
How much did you take? Very strong.
Yeah, exactly. Like this will come in a second. So basically I understood that the coffee is like a systemic problem. So I visit every single coffee shop in my city, which was around 35 places, and I asked, what do you do with your coffee? What do you do with it? And beside one lady that was using it in her own garden, everybody else was just throwing it away. And of course, this is not just coffee that is such an abundant organic material in the city that we could be utilizing to make topsoil. And I think something that really also encouraged me to do the topsoil is that the FAO conclusions that we have like 60 years of harvest left, right? But it was released a few years ago, so now we have 55 years of harvest left. And I was like, how is it possible that we are all not just making a topsoil? Like we're arguing if we should go on keto diet or vegan diet or paleo diet, but at the same time, like we have 50 years to like fix a crucial problem.
None of these diets matters if we don't have topsoil. Yeah.
Exactly. Like
only maybe if you go to an algae diet, you're sort of escaping that, but still, no.
Yeah. So I asked everybody what they're doing, and nobody was doing really anything. And then I started to teach other community gardens of like how they can build compost and how they can connect with the local entrepreneurs to take their bio-waste. But I quickly realized that like just running it on my own, just as a volunteer, like it was a systemic problem basically. So systemic problem is a systemic solution, right? So then I thought, okay, well, nobody really cares what I'm doing as in my free time, but if I say that I will turn it to a product, or if I basically want to step into the market, suddenly you gain so much momentum and traction, and people start listening and inviting you places. So I said, okay, let me try to figure out what can you do with coffee waste beside composting. Even I still believe that composting is the greatest way to deal with it. And I reach out to people. I just wrote on Facebook like, hey, I want to deal with this problem. Does somebody wants to join me? And I was very lucky because I got 3 people joining, then 2 people from my activist group also joined, and this is how we form like Connecting Grounds. So Connecting Grounds still exists. It's a startup which works on upcycling coffee waste into food products. And right now there's a lot of upcycling happening, and coffee is a very diverse material that you can use to various applications, from biomaterials like bioplastic to cosmetics to pharmaceuticals. But I think being nutritionist and always putting the importance of us first and foremost feeding ourselves rather than putting something on our skin or having shoe made up of coffee grounds, like it's great, but like if you can eat it, and we figure out that it's very simple to upcycle it. All you need to do is like have a dryer, dry your coffee waste, mill it to the right particle, and you can use it. You can use this flour. So it's naturally gluten-free. It's really high in fiber. It has 60 to 70% of fiber. It has some of the minerals.
So basically, we're talking about the leftover. So you make your espresso, you make your French press, and then you always have this sort of cake left, which is, I think, 96, 97% of the coffee bean. Like there's a very small percentage in your coffee, which is great. That's the whole industry. And the rest is, but you say you can simply grind it and it becomes flour, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah. And then like the craziest part of it is that once what the caffeine content that you extract to your cup of coffee, like it's almost nothing. Like you extract 200 milligrams of caffeine in your espresso cup, and then we run the test through a lab, and in the leftovers of coffee grounds you have around 600 milligrams of caffeine. Like, can you imagine? Like, we are only extracting like 1/4 of all of the caffeine that is available from this resource that traveled from Latin America and Africa. And, it was like so much work, so much energy. And then we have 25 seconds for this, tiny cup, and that's it. Like, that's it.
And when you say we can eat it as flour, what makes you say then you still believe that compost is better as like composting is it better or is it equally? Why would you say that if there's the option to eat it?
Yeah, like, so, I mean, first and foremost, I question if we have a healthy diet and we follow the lifestyle medicine approach where we take care of our, nutrition and physical activity and sleep, and we have the contact with other humans and stress management, like, will we really need a coffee to wake up? I think if you need a coffee to wake up, there's few problems before that you should look at rather than just going for an easy quick.
Good point. Yeah,
is the solution. But so like,
says the person that just had a coffee just before this interview. That's me. Yeah,
I'm not a shamer. Like, coffee is delicious. I'm also having it from time to time as a treat. So basically, my problem is that so when I started looking into the whole supply chain of coffee, like, I wanted to create this startup with a thought of bringing new economical streams from the farmers, because we know that with the climate change, especially the farmers who cultivate Arabica will most likely in 25 years to 30 years, most of the land will be unusable because Arabica needs very specific conditions. So we need to drastically rethink how much we use of our coffee. We are drinking as it would be water, as it would be something that, you're just like, yeah, I just go to my garden and I pick up my coffee beans. Like, I didn't see. Well, actually in Italy, now with the climate change, you're able to grow a coffee very south of Italy. But still, like, I don't see coffee bushes just like abundant in Holland where I am. And we are treating it as it would be abundant. And so right now I'm not in the startup anymore. I decided to exit it because I came and I embarked on this new adventure, and I really wanted to commit to regenerative agriculture and I knew that this is my path, and I was keep on pushing my team like, hey guys, but like, let's remember the farmers, really remember the regenerative agriculture, and that was just not fitting the whole solution. So
because it's so far, like the coffee farmers are on the other side, and in this case, you're providing a solution for the quote unquote waste, and of course, that doesn't impact it impacts the full energy side, life cycle assessment, etc., but doesn't impact the farmer whatsoever. And so it made a lot of sense, but not easy to because you sort of also become part of that startup, like your identity is part of that, like, and then wanting to exit that and take that road to either left or right, whatever the cut is not an easy step. And then then you came to Fresh, you came to Rotterdam, like that's quite a drastic cut.
It was a really drastic cut. And when I was here during the program, I was still with my startup, and as you said, like, it became a huge part of identity. You become obsessed, right? And you just so deeply want to fix this problem, and the know you more, the know you want, the more you know, the more you want to get engaged. But I just felt that because we are dealing with upcycling on the upstream, the more, like, the closer we were getting to go on the market, the less my motivation was there, because the more I understood that we'll have to still deal with the current food supply chain, which is maybe upcycling this coffee waste and then trying to sell it to a B2B product that can use it to have a sustainable ingredient. And it's just like, I think I'm a bit too extreme into what has to happen to be able to go on those compromises. And it's just too difficult for me.
So how did you find Fresh?
Well, they actually reached out to my best friend, Marco Nardini, which is a regenerative agronomist, and he loves your podcast.
Hi, Marco.
Hi, Marco.
I don't think we ever met, but I see you on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yes. And then they reached out to him because they had a really wide reach, and he's really engaged with what he was doing in Italy. So it wasn't for him at this moment, and he thought, oh, maybe this is something for you. And I look at it and I was like, oh, maybe, back then I was still writing my batch there. So it was, I was still in a different mindset, but I thought, okay, you know what, like, let me try. And I was just apply. And it's so interesting that most of those things in my life that really have a huge impact, they are the ones that I put the least effort, in a sense, because I was just like, yeah, whatever.
There's a lesson there. There's a lesson there. Yeah.
There is a lesson there for sure. Like the more, yeah, totally. And so I just did.
Perfect. And then, like, what was that? Because we talked to Bart, but it was beforehand, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Before the program started. I will link it below. But what was the experience like? I mean, I was a bit involved, but obviously not inside. What was that process of going through a venture studio? First, the online bit, which I remember, then it was very intense, offline, in person. And then you came out basically joining the studio with a company. Like, we'll go there at the end, but like, how was that process for you?
Yeah.
Because it sounds very intense.
It was extremely intense, but also extremely, like, it was the most growth period time of my life that I think set me off on this path. But not only me. I mean, what's so beautiful about the Fresh Studio is that they believe that you first invest in people, and then this investment will pay back in creating a solution with a real impact. So they invited 35 people with all different, paths of life. I mean, I don't think there was two people in the room that would have the same background. And they just throw us to a huge room and say, okay, 12 weeks, try to figure something out. So of course there was so much, like we get to know each other through online program, but it's such a different dynamic. And then you go and you're like, oh, you're actually way taller, or, like, oh, I didn't expect you have this kind of.
Yeah, that was a very intense online piece, I think, on a lot of the knowledge. I mean, you knew already, but like going deep in food and ag, and then you moved offline, in person, and still visited a lot of farms, a lot of food companies and things like that. And then really started working on solution paths. And at some point, okay, what kind of companies or solutions could grow out of this? How was that switch from offline to online? What happened there? Because it was still also in COVID time, so it was interesting. But like you got into this pressure cooker and knew, okay, for 12 weeks we're going to be here, thinking, building, iterating, being uncomfortable. Like, what was that? Like, did it fly? Was it very long? What was your feeling over in that in-person piece?
I think like if you would ask each of the members, like for sure everybody would have a different story to tell, right? And because for some it was coming from abroad to Rotterdam, so it was also like a life-changing event. For some, they're actually Dutch or they live here. And I think like the online program was a really great start for all of us to get a kind of a basic knowledge. Well, it was not really basic, but knowledge from terrestrial system and landless system and aquatic, because some of the people actually have not been within the food system. So for some it was quite a repetition. For others it was all new, but I think it was very important to get this vocabulary so we can also communicate and understand each other of what we're talking about. But I think like everybody was super excited to just be finally together. And of course, after a very long time of COVID and a lot of people being in isolation, but like just ideating via Zoom and even if you use like all of the wonderful technology as Mirror or whatever, like it's never the same as feeling each other and being in the room and feeling the vibrancy and the energy of each other and just like the passion and the motivation. So, I mean, for me personally, the program was quite like, it was an emotional roller coaster as well. I mean, I'm so deeply, very passionate, but also very scared of where we are. And I'm really feeling that there's, now we are behind the steering wheel of this society, all of us that are alive on this planet. And there's the huge responsibility for us to do something. So, of course, like there is so much desire to understand the problem and do something about it. So it was really like from week to week, it was like so many emotions happening. And the way the program was designed is that you first committed to like digging into the problem for 6 weeks. And then the next 6 weeks, you were slowly supposed to be transitioned from a problem to a solution. So it was we kind of divided each other into learning groups, and me and another wonderful woman decided to look at the nutrient density, which is your favorite topic and our favorite topic as well. So that was really wonderful to find another person that is, also with the same mindset, because the problems that people were working on were so diverse, from fixing the holistic grazing problem to farmer transition to creating creating products from regenerative outputs to nutrient density. Like with Roost, really, like we cover all of the supply chain and all of the problems and solutions that you could think of.
And then how did like that deep dive into the problem side, which you knew obviously, like how did that then transition into harvest care? Was it a very natural one? Was it very uncomfortable? Like how did that process over, in this case, 12 weeks or 6 weeks deep in the problem, and then slowly transitioning to solution side? How did that happen?
It wasn't definitely not a linear process, and I think nothing in the planet is linear, nor no our hormonal cycles, no the lunar cycle, no the season cycle, nothing is linear. So I think first and foremost, like the biggest learning for me was to get away from thinking that any of this process will be linear and just accepting the constant flow. So the current problem with the food system is that we are continuing to produce food as it would be still 90-50 and as would still be scarce in calories, right? I think some people say that the food system is broken. I think that the food system runs just as it was designed, which is producing the most calories with the calories that are the easiest to process, the easiest to transport, store, with no environmental, no human considerations, and also not even economical considerations. Because I mean, in 1985, the Common Agriculture Policy, which was implemented by the European Economical Community, was taking up 70% of the whole budget, right? So this system was never designed to really serve anybody besides creating huge abundance of calories.
Which it did, which it's doing.
Yeah, which is continuing doing, totally.
So you're saying the system is not broken, it works perfectly the way the global we designed it, but now it's time to redesign because we have solved for the hunger side of things. For most cases, obviously there are huge distribution issues, but in most cases we don't go to bed hungry, but we go to bed not like malnutrition or not fed. And that's a design question, or that's an incentive question, or that's a condition question of this food system. And so what to do?
Exactly. As you said it, like our current problem is the nutritional insecurity, when people have often the access of calories, but they're missing essential nutrients, as vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, bioactive compounds, and so on, that are only present in our whole foods. And whole foods by design should be harvested and consumed in a very short time, so they also have the highest nutrient density. So most of the people right now in the Western, in the Europe, are dying from lifestyle diseases, right? Which is from diabetes to cancers to strokes to heart disease, and those diseases are taking 86% of all of the deaths in Europe, right? It's
86. Let's just think that in, people listening. 86. That's an 8 and then a 6, which means almost all, basically. We have 14% left for our leftovers, but that's insane.
And those numbers, they are not only human suffering behind, which I think for me at least is the most painful, but also they are huge burden of our economies. They take 25% of the whole total healthcare spending in Europe, and they are just being expected to be on the rise. But they also, create a huge loss of human power and human capital because of those disabilities. And I think, at least for me, like we really need people healthy and ready, because we have real environmental challenges to fix. And we need to be people on the point with their health, right?
Both mentally and physically, we have a lot to do, and we're not in great shape. I think that's a conclusion there. We're not ready at all for this ecological transition because, we're not being fed, or we're not feeding ourselves with the right kind of nutrients, the right kind of foods to even mentally have that, be able to go through this, and physically, let alone. I mean, we need to plant a lot of trees, and we need to do a lot of work physically. And yes, they're going to be augmented. Like, we're going to have technology helping us for many things, but let's not kid ourselves. This is not a laptop revolution. This is very, very different. So we need to get in shape.
Exactly. And it's very difficult to get in shape when the food we consume, even if we consume whole foods, which we know it's really not the case for majority of the population, simply also because the organic or whole foods are so expensive and they are inaccessible for most of the society. But still, within the conventional agricultural practices, we are lowering the nutrient density, right? So the studies in US show that on average, the nutritional value we lost is around 38%. And those are big numbers, and those are numbers from essential nutrients, which are needed for healthy functioning of our body. And then beyond that, just to finish it off with like all the food, it's not only what this food is missing, but also what is present in our food that we don't want those molecules to be present. And there was a annual report published by European Food Safety Authority in 2020 showing that at least half of the fruits and vegetables in Europe consist of pesticide residue, and out of this half, at least 1/3 consists of a cocktail of up to 15 residue. And we have no idea what is happening in our body once so many chemicals that should not supposed to be there are running through our bloodstream. And so now I'm going to the transition, because you asked me like what's the
because
transition?
This is very depressing. Like this sounds so big. Like, okay, we can see the problem. And now it's like, okay, what's the entry point?
Exactly.
Because that of course you are forced in a venture studio to start thinking about venture. Like we can be an activist on this side. We can do amazing scientific work, but that's not the role. I mean, you are an activist, but that's the role you chose, the role as an entrepreneur. So what's the entry point?
Yeah, exactly. So the entry point became an endocrine system for me. So endocrine system
Explain.
Yes, let me explain. So the endocrine system is specifically threatened by all of the pesticide residue, as I just mentioned, because in those pesticide residue, there's something called endocrine disruptive chemicals. And those are chemicals which mimic or disrupt our hormones in our body, and they send like confusing messages and cause all kinds of dysfunctions. So
what is the endocrine system? Just very, very for everybody that English isn't their first language.
Endocrine system is basically our hormonal
reproductive system.
Yes. So
on the women's side.
No,
or also men. Actually,
also
both.
men. I mean, everybody has an endocrine system. Everybody is basically governed by our endocrine system. I mean, we are governed by our biology, and I think too often we are forgetting that we're part of the nature. So both men and women have, endocrine systems, and we're being threatened, or it's being exposed to so many toxins that our hormones, which are completely governing our emotions, our health, etc., are getting either confused or actually very badly, let's say, sending signals you don't want in your body. Exactly. And as you said, they cover so much. They cover our mental health, our reproductive health, our metabolism, our energy level, our microbiota. Basically, whatever you think of as being performing, endocrine has an influence.
So our operating system is being hacked. Basically, that's and not in a good way.
Yeah. Not in a good way. And you were the one, Koen, that you helped me also like going to this direction, because you have during the Fresh program, you sent me the white paper released by insurance company saying that due to the low-grade accumulation of toxicity exposure in our food, but not only in our cosmetics, in plastic products, we have a huge infertility challenges, and they're predicting that with the current decline in sperm activity, with next 35 years, only 15 to 20% of the couples will be able to conceive naturally, right? So in next 30 years, basically our biology
just let have that sink in for a second, people. I will put a paper below. It's written by Jeremy Grantham, very famous investor on the institutional side. Founder of GMO, which is funny because it's his name. It has nothing to do with GMO, and they are a supporter of the podcast as well through their foundation. And he has been hammering down this like the toxicity is a real threat. We don't know exactly where it comes, we know where it comes from. We don't know exactly what it does or how it works. We know what it does because we see the outcome. And he said a famous sentence somewhere in that white paper that he published, or actually in his normal let's say, investor newsletter where he was talking about sperm count and toxicity, which I already find hilarious that in like pension funds, etc., they get this white paper, they read it because it is Jeremy Grantham, and they talk about sperm count, which is not the normal thing they discuss in these boardrooms. But anyway, he said the famous sentence, if you're planning to have children over the next years, and both men and women, and we come back to this piece you just mentioned, have to avoid all toxicity possible, which means eating organic, preferably beyond, but that's maybe too much to ask at the moment, or we get there. Like, this toxicity is so threatening to us. Like, we're not reproducing at the level we need for our pension system, for all the work we need to do, for like couples are going through hell to get pregnant naturally. And you say that's just going down further, and which means very expensive programs, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering for not getting pregnant in a natural way, which sort of should be a right for anybody if you want that. But apparently we're losing that ability, which is very scary. So you thought, okay, this is the entry point for where there is so much pain and where there is so much possibility as well.
Exactly. And just to summarize this endocrine, I think what I spend a lot of time reflecting and I'm really fascinated about is that endocrine disruption and climate change have a common origin, which is the fossil fuel consumption and production. Because many of the pesticides include all kinds of chemicals as ethylene and propylene and methane, which we have access thanks to the petroleum. So I think it's like nature showing us middle finger, right?
In your face, yeah. You thought you could burn this stuff. Yeah. Good luck with that. Exactly. So we're running ourselves into the ground, basically, literally. Like, this is where I mean, you just have to look at the numbers. It's really, really scary. So what on the let's show the path to solution.
Yes.
Like, is this quote unquote easily fixable? Like, are there examples, studies, like if you stop exposing yourself as a couple, like what's that connection to, I mean, there's a very easy outcome. Do you get pregnant naturally or not? Like, it's sort of, that's a quite an easy test. Like, what has been going on in that world? Have people been doing research there, experiments, exposing people to, let's say, beyond organic or organic whole foods, etc.?
Yeah, so I didn't look like I took the focus of endocrine, but not specifically on fertility, but on woman endocrine system. And with specific, I was focusing on polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the most prevalent endocrine disease among women. It's up to 20% of us that are suffering from it. And the way it happens is basically your follicle cell cannot mature. So instead of being released from your ovaries, it's transformed to cysts, and then with time you accumulate more and more cysts, and then they stop, or like they hugely impact your hormone cycle. And there's ton of research out there and ton of examples how you can manage this disease with lifestyle, which includes healthy diet, physical activity, preferably like hormonal yoga. So you also adapt your physical activity to your predisposition throughout your month, and also stress management, because elevated stress hormones can also negatively influence this disease. And women are managing to heal themselves. I mean, it's not a disease that you can just go on a treatment and then get better and then just quit. That's not how it works. You just have to transform your life. And I think that's one of the challenge of, in general, it's just like, well, one of the challenge of using food as medicine is that we are so used to being like very passive when it comes to our health. Our health and body literacy and also food literacy are extremely low. And here we are talking about, transforming your lifestyle. So I think the reason why I love regenerative agriculture, because indeed, like, it's so easy to get caught up with all of the problems and how difficult the challenges are, and complex. And the more you understand them, the more you want to dig in. But the approach of regenerative agriculture, which have the solutions of how to heal the food system, always pulls me back. It's like, okay, like, focus on what can we do right now, and there's few benefits from regenerative agriculture in particular. For using food as medicine and endocrine health. First is that if regenerative agriculture is produced organically, then of course it won't have the endocrine disruptive chemicals, which is like very important. But additionally, and I don't want to go too much into it because you had the guru of the nutrient density before me here, and David Montgomery and Anna Beagle, which explained beautifully everything. And I don't want to even try to repeat anything.
I will link it below. But I think it's interesting. Like, what does it add now? Is we say women are able to heal themselves with the right type of yoga, meditation, stress release, eating well. They are okay. Like, what does it add now to go beyond and say, no, we're actually going to use regenerative practices to create, quote unquote, to grow food as medicine? Like, what do you see there as the opportunity? Or why do you think that's an interesting path?
So we need to heal ourselves and we need to heal the planet in the same time. And regenerative agriculture allows us to do it because we know that if we know you will not disturb the soil, we'll plant the cover crops, we'll have intensive crop rotations, we will have the positive effect on the soil microbiome. The positive effect on soil microbiome will lead to higher nutrient density, which will allow us to access food that will heal us faster while healing the soil of Europe or the world or whatever. So this is why, and now I will go to the Harvest Care, which is like the venture that came out from the Fresh. The idea behind Harvest Care is to build an organization of a digital food pharmacy that supports women endocrine disorders using medically tailored food, blended care approach, and community building. And then in later phase, I hope to also include regenerative food provisioning to help them to restore their hormonal balance at the same time regenerate the soil in Europe. And I know that there's lots to unpack there, but is it okay if I would just take the time to
please go?
Yeah,
please unpack. Yeah.
I'm unpacking that. Well, then let's start from the medically tailored food. Like basically, medically tailored food is a diet that is prescribed for a specific disease for a specific person. And I think what's super important for me as a health professional is that I see a lot of reductionist approach to looking at the diet. Of people may be filling out the questionnaire and saying like, okay, well, if you want to lose weight, you should be eating this. But it's completely out of the context. Like it doesn't take into account any kind of, behavioral psychology, how we work, what is the process behind forming a new habit. And I just don't believe that any kind of software without the human touch will be able to facilitate this. So instead of creating an easily scalable solution, what I really want to do is scale up the accessibility to health professionals which use food as medicine. Because the challenge, and I this challenge comes from my personal experience that as nutritionist, I am not really part of the Western conventional medicine and the healthcare. So I think first and foremost, creating a place where we can really scale the accessibility and the easiness of accessing people who can help you with diet is crucially important. And the reason why those diets should be super personalized is to not only help to people understand of what they should be eating, but also guide them through all of the process of gaining new knowledge, gaining new skills, changing, how they relate to their self, how they relate to their body, to their food. And this, I really believe, people need people approach. So that would be definitely one of the part of the solution. Then I decided to focus on women hormonal health because, well, first and foremost, because I can, and I think it's amazing. And, our cycles are really overlooked in the society. We live in a very linear society, which disregards all of the biological cycles, including those running within our bodies. And I strongly believe that I'm committing to Harvest Care for many, many years ahead of me. So I think having, at least at the beginning, a very strong personal motivation to do it is also really important. And then I mentioned blended care. So once I stopped heavily digging into agriculture and the healthcare connection, I started looking at, actually what is the best approach to form a new, health enhancing behaviors and what is the science behind there. And then this blended care really emerged as something that is the future of the healthcare. So the blended care takes 101 person visit, which can either be online or offline, with a health professional. So in a Harvest Care example, it will be dietitian or nutritionist. And then they use technology to help you, to nudge you to perform this.
To actually do it, yeah.
To actually do it, yeah.
To implement it, to not forget, to build that habit change, which is so difficult. That's not like, it's like changing habits is insanely complicated but extremely important. So you do that mix of in person, either video or in person, and then implementing that new habit or the new habits basically in trying to deal with that syndrome. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think like the human element is really there to, like, there are studies showing that if there is a health professional involved, like, people motivation to adhere to a forming of a new behavior is higher. But then why also not use technology, which can help you on, the moments that we cannot be together. And we are very lucky because we are located in Rotterdam, where there is the Erasmus Medical Center that is really pioneering the blended care approach. And we are even looking at possibility of testing our blended care solutions to strengthen the validity behind it. And then another element that I really want to work with is a community aspect. And I know that nowadays a lot of companies are throwing communities just, I think, to put a bit of a human perspective for the businesses. But the reason why I strongly believe is that you need to build communities around your new behavior is that you're transforming your life, and you need people around.
I think we've learned that in addiction, like AA meetings are successful for many years because there's community. And we have many examples of accountability, showing up, being with other people going through similar things, or a bit ahead or a bit behind. I mean, that's what we do, and that's how we function.
We are social animals, and with your new experiences, you shift your priorities, and you want to have people in your life where you'll be able to resonate and maintain those new, you have new skill, like suddenly fermenting became a super important part of your diet. Like, you want people around you which also want to ferment, and you want to have Friday fermentation days, And we need
you want to be able to ask questions like, is this bubble normal, or should it be smelling differently? Yeah,
exactly. And it's just so super important. And one of the way we want to test this is that we are going to hold workshop about endocrine health for women with PCOS, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, on the farm. And we want to see if them being exposed and experiencing what does health means and where does health begins, if it will have increasing their willingness to implement those changes.
Very interesting. Let's just repeat once the syndrome slowly, so everybody who's writing can Google it as well. I'll put a link below, definitely. But if you're currently thinking, I just didn't catch it because it was too fast, what's the syndrome, but slowly? It's
called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS.
Okay. PCOS. So you can definitely find more. I'll put a link below. And so where are you now? It's very early in the journey of the company. I had to convince you to come on because you said it's too early. I don't know yet. I said, yes, but I would love to talk to you now, and then talk to you again in a year, in 2 years, and just keep following this because that's what we do. So what's the current, we're talking the end of August 2022. We're at the end of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, obviously. What would you say the current status is, or how would you describe Harvest Care as of this moment?
As of this moment, yeah, you really had to convince me because I wasn't, you have so many amazing participants that have done so much, and then I come here with my dreams and hopes, but sometimes I would treat it as a manifestation into the world. But so currently we are, we
now you have a community of 2,500 people that are going to hold you accountable.
So I am.
You'll be good.
We'll be good. So what was super cool with Fresh is that they are really helping me to, because I'm not a person that, if I would have to create a business as usual, I would never be doing it. But they are really encouraging me to saying don't worry, we will find business models that will serve the purpose and the mission that you want to accomplish. And something that is crucially important for me, and this is long term, is to also see how can I work with insurance companies, because I I can so easily see how regeneration and nutrient density can be easily used as another luxury product. Like imagine that, I test your microbiota and then I say, okay, and now I will design a perfect nutrient density diet for, to diversify your microbes. And I could not look into a mirror if I would go this the path. For me, what's really important is to see how can we serve those who are not served. And there is such a strong economical proofs and reasoning behind, showing that prevention is cheaper than intervention. And in US especially, they have, and you also have the founder of Serious Community, where they manage, right, to subsidize healthy food and teach kids how to cook medically tailored diets. And so it's something super important, but of course this is long term, and you first need to prove your value, or like the value of the model that you design. So this is what we are doing right now. We want to take those elements that we found both from like NGO worlds and business world, and put them into our pack, our model, and see what works, what doesn't. So as I said, like the first phase is to invite women with PCOS on a on-farm experiences workshop, but also with cooking workshop, with educational bits, sharing, community creation, basically what Harvest Care wants to do, but just on a tiny scale, and see how are we being able to deliver this value. Another track which is super important for me is to also spread the knowledge about regenerative agriculture to other nutritionists. So we also want to invite nutritionists and dietitians on the farm to spread the information about the benefits of the healthy soil for healthy humans. And then in phase 2, it will be building a software of a digital food pharmacy, which will connect and facilitate the relationship between people with diseases that can be treated and managed through food as medicine. And I like to think about, the behavior change a bit of like learning a new language. So I would love this software be a place where you don't only meet your dietitian, but also the dietitian or nutritionist can you prescribe you like a homework as watch this video of how to manage your glucose level while using indigenous grains, which are now cultivated by the regenerative local farmers. And then step 3 would be to integrate this applications or this food prescriptions with vertical supply chain of regenerative food. And I don't want to, like, I'm very, very, my spirit is very collaborative, and I know that the solution will require involvement of many people, and I don't want to necessarily create a supply, regenerative supply chains. There are already amazing people working on it. It's all a question like how can we match and mix together. And then once hopefully we'll manage to prove that the harvester is, helping people, is helping farmers, then we'll have enough of evidence to go to insurance companies and say, hey, look, this will save you money and save people lives and will transform people lives. So please help people to access food, which should be our basic human right for those who cannot do it right now.
So your strategy is really to prove this at a scale and at a scalable way, let's say, and then go to the insurance companies to make sure it becomes accessible also for those who cannot afford it on their own or don't even know it exists or would never be exposed to it if we don't act now. It might take 10, 20 years or whatever before this knowledge is out there. And so what would you tell? I mean, you're diving deep into this space of nutrient density and the quality of food and the connection to regen ag. And I think investors are listening or people are listening, like, what would you tell them after you're emerging out of this basically now a year later or 8 or 9 months later, without giving investment advice, obviously, but what would you tell investors to look into or to dig deeper into in this quality piece or this quality space or the nutrient density space? Where to look, where to dig deeper, where to ask more questions?
Yeah, I'm just a humble nutritionist now, so like I'm not sure if I am capable of.
And a startup founder, yeah.
And a startup founder, but my perspective is very much like human and ecosystem well-being, but definitely development of machinery that we can measure the nutrient density, and we know that the bionutrient association is already doing it, but having this as a investing more money into this area where basically every consumer could be equipped with this kind of little tool, that would be amazing. But also what's kind of scares me a bit, maybe it's like how much investment goes to this alternative protein. And now we know that like actually this alternative meat production can influence our genome, and it's quite tricky. So I would, if we really want to change people's health and we want to act fast, we need to invest much more money in humans, just as Fresh did with us. Like we need to start running programs where we increase people's food awareness, food literacy, health awareness. So rather of like maybe investing so much money in like single product, which maybe is a great to gain money, like no health comes from a single product. Just as health in ecosystem comes from diversity, it's the same as our health comes from the diversity. So investing in paradigm shift and the mindset shift, I think, at least from my perspective, it's crucial.
So what would you do? I mean, this is a natural bridge to the €1 billion question we love to ask. If you're in charge of €1 billion, what would you, with a very long time horizon, but it definitely should be put to work with the idea it comes back, what would you focus on?
So I strongly believe that there's way too high accumulation of human capital in cities, and that we need to start going away from centralized location and spreading this human capital. So I would start investing in creating hubs like social, food, knowledge hubs around regenerative farms, where they create possibility of young people, of young families, but also older generation to come in and start leading a drastically different life based on community, life based on localization. And with this kind of capital, I think, like looking at the city, we really design cities in a way that they don't benefit any of our physiological needs, and they don't respect our physiological cycles. So reshaping how we live and making regenerative farms as like the central hub of life and of creation of an ecosystem, human ecosystem. This is how I would spend this 1 billion.
Fascinating. And probably, I mean, this would go a very long way. I mean, you don't need 100 million per farm. Like you need way less, and it's a very interesting, a whole different rabbit hole to go into the urban and rural divide and the future of that, which sort of seems to be crumbling now with COVID, with remote working for many people is possible. With the city has its advantages, but also lost a lot of the shiny stuff we used to see. So let's see I think it's going to be a very defining moment now that many people, not everyone, or most people actually not, but a big chunk of people could practically work from anywhere, and maybe they do. And maybe hopefully they choose interesting places to be, which in my case, obviously are regenerative farms, and they will bring an energy, they will bring some finance as well. They will bring questions, but also interesting answers to these places that often have been depopulated over the last decades or last few hundred years, where we all moved to the big shiny city. So that's a very interesting, we're going to see how that plays out. And if you could change one thing overnight in the food and agriculture system, what would that be if you had a magic wand?
So with my magic wand, I would design the food system in a way that always prioritize human health throughout all of the processes, from the production to harvesting to storage to processing. Because if we would really focus on what is needed for our health, we would get rid of most of our problems. We would get rid of monocultures, we would get rid of agrochemicals, we would get rid of junk food, and would just have completely different experience on this planet as humans, and also would allow for nature to have a different experience with us being on this planet with her.
I think it's a perfect way to end this conversation. I couldn't agree more. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. It wasn't easy. I mean, I know you wanted to be further along, but I think it's really good to check in now and follow this over time, as we love to do in this podcast. And I want to thank you so much for the work you do and for coming here and share about your journey.
Thank you so much, Koen. And I'm super excited to come back in 1 or 2 years and reflect and say, wow, that was a journey, huh?
Will do. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. For the show notes and links discussed, check out our website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/post. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. For the show notes and links we discussed in this episode, check out our website, investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/posts. If you like this episode, why not share it with a friend or give us a rating on Apple Podcasts? That really helps. Thanks again, and see you next time.